I wanted to mention, earlier I mentioned sensor networks. I wanted to mention one that I have in the house. This is a commercial product. It was made by a company called APRICOT, which has been acquired recently by Cisco. They run 6-LoWPAN IPv6 radio mesh network. So each of the sensors is in fact a small store and forward node. It's maintaining connectivity by measuring radio linkages among all the devices in the house. Each of the rooms of the house, 12 principal rooms of the house, has a sensor that is measuring temperature, humidity, and light levels every 5 minutes. That information is recorded in a server in the basement, and I get reports twice a day on what the status of the house network is. One of the rooms in the house is very important to me. It's the wine cellar. It has a couple thousand bottles of wine in it, and so that room has been alarmed. If the temperature goes above 60 degrees Fahrenheit, an alarm goes off and I get an SMS on my mobile. A few months back, I was visiting the Argonne National Laboratory in the state of Illinois in the United States, and as I was walking in the door, the mobile went off. It was the wine cellar calling. And it said, you've just broken through the 60-degree Fahrenheit barrier. Unfortunately, my wife was away on holiday, so she wasn't there to reset the cooling system. For 3 days, every 5 minutes, I got a note saying, your wine is warming up. So I called the APRICOT guys and said, do you make remote actuators? And they said yes. And I said, okay, that's a weekend project. We need to install a remote actuator to turn on the cooling system. And then I thought we'd better put in very strong authentication so the 15-year-old next door doesn't reprogram my house while I'm away. Then I got to thinking, you know, I can tell if someone has gone into the wine cellar because I can see the lights going off and on in the recording of light levels, but I don't know what they did in there. So I thought, well, why don't I put an RFID chip on each bottle? And then I can do an instantaneous inventory of all the bottles in the wine cellar. That would tell me if any bottle has left the wine cellar without my permission. And then one of my engineer friends was debugging the design, and he said, you know, you could go into the wine cellar and drink the wine and leave the bottle. So I have some debugging to do to fix this design. In the end, this turns out to be a very practical kind of system to have, though, because now I'm going to have to put sensors in the cork of each bottle. And as long as you're going to that much trouble, you might as well detect the state of the esters in the wine that make it, you know, give it its various flavors. So before you open the bottle, interrogate the cork. And if this is the bottle that got up to, you know, 90 degrees Fahrenheit because the cooling system failed, that's the bottle you give to somebody who doesn't know the difference. So this is a really practical kind of system to build, and there will be more of them in the future, I'm sure. I'm going to finish by giving you a quick status report on the interplanetary internet. Everyone who hears this for the first time thinks I've gone crazy and I'm waiting for the Martians to come and communicate. This project was started because my colleagues at the Jet Propulsion Lab and I believed that we needed richer networking for space exploration than simply point-to-point radio links. We imagined that there would be multiple sensors on the surface of the planet that needed to be locally networked, that there would be multiple orbiters and maybe mobile devices, as there are today on Mars. And we wanted a rich networking environment. We started out thinking that TCP/IP would work. This is a picture of Mars in Google Mars, in case you haven't gone there. This is the kind of picture that you can see in Google Mars as you zoom in on the planet. The store and forward networking on Mars has gotten fairly elaborate. The rovers in the lower left were originally designed to communicate directly back to Earth with a point-to-point radio link at 28 kilobits a second. When they were turned on, the radios overheated, and they had to reduce the duty cycle to keep the radio from harming itself. The scientists were quite upset about that because 28 kilobits was already pretty slow, and now they weren't going to get continuous transmission from the surface. The programmers at JPL recognized that they had another radio which couldn't go all the way back to Earth, but it ran at 128 kilobits a second, and it could reach up to the satellites that were in orbit. The radios were compatible. So they reprogrammed the orbiter and the rovers so the rover could transmit data up to the orbiting satellite. The orbiting satellite would hang on to that data until it got to the right place in its orbit to transmit data back to Earth to the deep space network. That's store and forward. That's what packet switching is. That's how the internet works. So the information that's coming back from Mars is coming back with a store and forward system. This worked so well that when the Phoenix lander landed at the North Pole of Mars, they designed it around this store and forward system. So we got quite excited about that demonstration. I'm sorry, it's like an eye chart again, but I just want to emphasize that when we started, we thought we could use TCP/IP to make all this work. And it would work fine inside the spacecraft. It will work on the surface of Mars just as well as it works on the surface of Earth. But it doesn't work between the planets. And the problem is that the speed of light is too slow. If you look at the distance between Earth and Mars, when we're closest together, it's 3.5 minutes one way of propagation delay. When we're farthest apart, it's 20 minutes propagation delay and 40 minutes round trip. Can you imagine trying to run, a web page where you hit the mouse button and 40 minutes later the first bit shows up? I know some of you have experienced networks like that here on Earth, but it isn't because of speed of light delay. It just gets worse when you go to the outer planets. So we said, okay, this is an example of what we'll call variable delay and disruption. The reason it's disrupting is that the planets are rotating, and we haven't figured out how to stop that. So if you're talking to something on the surface of the planet that's rotating, eventually it's on the wrong side of the planet, and you can't talk to it till it comes back around again. So we had to develop a new suite of protocols that we call delay and disruption tolerant networks. These protocols have now been tested terrestrially. We had the reindeer herders in northern Sweden helping us test these things by having all-terrain vehicles with the DTM protocols in them. As they would approach a village with a Wi-Fi server, we would dump things off and put things onto the all-terrain vehicles. We've had tests in the International Space Station. We have 3 devices that are on board using these new protocols. We put the protocols on board what was called the Deep Impact spacecraft several years ago, which rendezvoused with Temple 1 and fired a probe into the comet. That spacecraft revisited another comet recently called Hartley 2. And we uploaded our protocols to that spacecraft, which is in eccentric orbit around the sun. So as the 2011 year unfolds, I'm hoping to have multi-node testing of the new interplanetary protocols. Why would we do all this? Well, what we're hoping in the long run is to grow an interplanetary backbone, both to support manned and robotic exploration. If all of the spacefaring nations of the world adopt the new interplanetary protocols, then they will be compatible with each other. They will be able to exchange data. And when a spacecraft has completed its primary mission, it could be repurposed to become part of a node of an interplanetary backbone. So we don't suggest that we should literally build an interplanetary network and hope that someone will use it. Rather, we're saying, let's grow one mission by mission, each mission taking place because of scientific interests, but leaving behind a potential element of an interplanetary backbone. So I won't live to see the end of this. Many of you will see more than I will. But I think that it's very exciting to be part of a project which takes what sounds like a crazy idea and turns into an engineering reality. And that brings us back to APAN and APRICOT, where ideas become engineering reality. Thank you very much.